Hi there, and welcome to Nostalgic Dreams with Jordan Fringe. Today, we are going to talk about some Nickelodeon shows with facts and fun about them to help you fall asleep. We shall start the video and your first step into Snoozeland with Jimmy Neutron. Wait, who in the Code Lyoko is this? Well, that's Johnny Quasar, the original test for the idea of Jimmy Neutron. In the 1980s, this guy here, John A. Davis, worked on the pre-production ideas for a short called Runaway Rocket Boy that would follow Mr. Quasar here. The short would follow Johnny after he builds a rocket to run away from home, hence the name Runaway Rocket Boy. Originally in mind, this was going to be a fusion of live action and CGI technology from that time, but with little movement to pursue this idea further, nothing really came of it in the 80s. John had his own studio though, DNA Productions, you know, the "Hi, I'm Paul" three-eyed monkey thing at the end of Jimmy Neutron episodes. It's burned into my brain, and I'll never forget it. At DNA Productions, they began trying out some software for computer animation, and came to the decision that his Johnny Quasar story is really better suited for CGI. Here's where we fast forward to this video, the proof of concept all done with computer graphics that shows Johnny and his robotic dog flying in a rocket. John and DNA Productions co-founder Keith Alcorn got to work finishing up what this would fully look like, as well as creating the series Bible if it were to become a full-fledged TV series instead of a movie. Following a circuit of showing off this short proof of concept around, buzz on it was spreading, winning awards and getting articles in magazines. And while all of this is really cool, the most important thing that happened to it is that Steve Odekirk saw it and wanted in on it. He was the founder of Ahh Entertainment and thought that what John and Keith had put together looked fun. These three linked up at one point, and Steve took a look at what they had fully come up with concept-wise, so he wanted to help take them around and pitch Johnny Quasar to some networks in the hopes of making it a reality. So now we have two studios coming together, and the outcome was making an episode with the new title of the show, The Adventures of Johnny Quasar, taking the visuals to a new level, redesigning a bunch of stuff, and overall just fleshing out this short into something a lot more tangible as a show. Now we've reached the mid-90s, and Nickelodeon was the big network at the table. They were interested in the concept, and even more importantly, the president of Nick at the time, Albie Hetch, was interested in this concept. From the character of Johnny himself to the base concept of what the show was. This was great. There was interest. Johnny Quasar may become a reality. Nickelodeon told them to get to work finishing up a 13-minute pilot on Nickelodeon's dime. So after a few years going back and forth, really tailoring out what this show would be, what the creators wanted and what Nick wanted, the full pilot was finished in 1998. Nickelodeon had one major request though that would change Johnny Quasar into the character we know today. They wanted the name of the main character and the show name overall changed so that there was no shred of feeling like the names were taken from past popular properties. Davis would ultimately be the one to come up with the new and final name for the main character and show, as after he went for a walk with his dog with him, something just ended up clicking out of thin air. The name Jimmy Neutron was born, and just like that, the final missing piece to make this show complete was formed, and Nickelodeon was happy with both the name and the show pilot itself. Now, here's where the big idea shifted. How do we launch this show? We could shoot it up like a rocket right into space and see what happens, or we can be calculated, make sure the math is right, and then launch it with a lot more prep, knowing exactly what we are doing. The idea to bring awareness to the eventual show was to make a theatrical film, which Nickelodeon was finding some success in from their few live-action films, but definitely with their animated films. There were a lot of benefits here. The assets would be able to be shared between both the film and the show, which means there is a lot of money to be saved right there alone, aside from some work on the theatrical models to add a bit more detail to them, just like most big-budget animated films do when working on an existing property or future property. But rather than have a show that comes out and then has a movie like we see in the majority of cases when an animated show gets pretty popular, a movie is more likely to be made. But John thought that releasing the movie first would work as a gateway to the show, along with some other behind-the-scenes production workflow past the film. While there were a lot of worries just delivering a new property to people with nothing to base it on, you know, why would kids be excited for it? They decided to risk it for the biscuit and went with a feature film first, giving this intuition they had a chance. It was greenlit with a $30 million budget in 1999, and production began the following year, and the film was fully released in theaters on December 21st, 2001, becoming the animated film for families for the holidays. This was the first time that Nickelodeon would release a film in theaters that was computer generated generated over their live action and 2D animated films, but all the worries that the creators had taking this risk, as well as Nickelodeon taking this risk, were quickly pushed aside, as Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius would become a hit, earning a total of right under $103 million at the box office, cementing Jimmy Neutron as a winning bet, and the franchise would be good to come out following the film. So now that we've established all that, let's take a look at what the movie itself was about and how it perfectly set up the show. I'll get this out of the way right from the start. I love this movie. I remember going to theaters and seeing this movie, and now as an adult, they finally put it on Blu-ray. Life sure is sweet sometimes. But the film follows, well, the adventures of Jimmy Neutron, which makes sense since that's the name of the show itself later on. Jimmy Neutron is kinda like your typical kid. He goes to school, he has friends, he has a robotic dog, and he's a super genius at 11 years old. Yeah, just your typical kid. He lives in Retroville, a quaint suburban town that has a smaller downtown area, and we meet basically everyone important here. His friends, Carl Weezer and Sheen Estevez, his parents, Hugh and Judy, and even his maybe crush but total mental gymnastic rival, Cindy Vortex. Of course, we would meet a lot more characters in the film that get more expanded roles in the show, like Libby, Cindy's best friend, Nick the cool kid, and who can forget Miss Fowl. Yeah, of course, we really get to meet Jimmy, understand who he is, how his smarts constantly causes trouble for others, and how he has to brain blast a solution to fix everything up. And his dog Goddard is there too. Well, to be fair, he comes in handy as a mode of transportation, a loyal companion, a storage unit, and so much more. Goddard is just overall pretty great. Now, what is the actual plot of the film? So this will play into what happens shortly, but we start the film with Jimmy flying past the military to launch a homemade satellite of sorts into space, in hopes of it reaching other intelligent life among the stars. But back to the surface of Earth, Jimmy's parents aren't happy with him and his scientific mischievousness. So what do kids do when their parents don't let them get their way, and they are punished for their actions, but you still want to go to the grand opening of the Retroland amusement park? Well, they listen to a bad influence, which comes in the vessel of Nick, you know, the cool kid, who tells him to sneak out at night and go have fun at the amusement park with everyone else going. So he disobeys his parents, meets up with Carl and Sheen, and they go have the time of their lives at the park, all backed by one of the greatest songs ever made, Pop by NSYNC. No, I'm not going to debate you on that. It's no longer subjective, it's a fact. Speaking of facts, the music in this film is great. Like, the actual songs they picked for the film are some real bops that make the film even more special. It doesn't date it by being so early 2000s. I like it, so leave me alone. Their night went really well. Everyone had a good time, and oh, a shooting star. Time to make a wish. A wish for no more parents, so the kids can do whatever they want when they want. But remember that satellite from the start of the movie? Well, it reached someone. A few someones, the Yokians, an alien race of egg-like beings with their robotic outer shells giving them the full completed egg look. I love them. They're great bad guys. They see a picture of Jimmy's parents and realize that parents are exactly what they need for a great sacrifice. So they swoop down to Earth, kidnap all of the parents in town as the kids are at the amusement park, and when the morning rolls around, the wish technically came true as all of the parents are gone. So all of the kids throw the biggest party they can, taking over the entire town, the school, the streets, and just live it up, until they are sick of it. And Jimmy realizes that the parents didn't all just leave without telling their kids goodbye. In fact, when they were talking to Goddard when they thought he was Jimmy, as he was pretending to be him hiding in bed, they said, "See you in the morning." So Big Brain here does some research in his lab, and lo and behold, aliens visited Earth and they took all of their parents. Whatever is an 11-year-old kid and the rest of his classmates to do? Yup, rallied together going into space after the aliens to rescue their parents. How, you ask? Well, they dismantle the amusement park, turning different rides into space-traveling vessels. Again, another bop plays here, being Kids in America by No Secrets, and it's working and everything's great, and then this moment happens, and you're all worried, but then the engines all ignite back properly. The music turns back on at the exact moment, and kids in the theater, including myself, are losing their minds. Popcorn is flying everywhere, vomit is spewing. This was that moment where you were locked in. You believe that these kids are really going to do it, and you kind of wish that you were one of them. So after some space traveling, they make their way to the Yokian planet, Yolkis, where they are easily able to find their parents, but unfortunately, they are all wearing some mind control helmets that make them follow the command of the leader of the Yolkians, King Goobot. So when Jimmy tries to save his father, he is caught, and Your Royal Highness King Goobot comes over to tell Jimmy and all of his friends that their parents being captured and the fact that they are about to be sacrificed to their giant chicken god Pultra was all Jimmy's fault in the first place for sending out that satellite containing all that extra information needed for them to come to Earth. So now the kids are imprisoned. Everyone hates Jimmy, Goddard is stripped away from them, and Cindy ends up giving Jimmy the pep talk that he needs to not give up and help come up with a plan to escape from the prison cells and save their parents before they are eaten by a giant chicken. He uses Libby's cell phone to reach out to Goddard, who is able to break free from his captivity and help free the kids. Now it's a race to save the parents as the giant chicken is about to be hatched. The adults are doing the chicken dance, Sheen steals one of the Yolkian ships that runs into Pultra in the arena, Goddard snatches the mind control remote as the kids are able to take all of the parents and start escaping back into the stars, but the Yokian armada is sent after them. They manage to take out most of the ships thanks to the power of the sun before a final confrontation with King Goobot, who begins to mock Jimmy for his small stature, but Jimmy has an ace up his sleeve, hopping on the back of Goddard, charging right at King Goobot's ship using his shrink ray, but to do the opposite of shrinking, which is growing. So now there is this massive Jimmy Neutron, and he is able to send their ship right into an asteroid, destroying it, which then has the cooking egg yolk goo of what's left of the king, vowing that he will one day return to get back at Jimmy Neutron, which will actually be a plot point in the show itself, and sorry if that's a spoiler, I guess. The parents are all saved, everyone makes amends, and they learn their lessons, with them all making it back to Earth to do scientific things another day. And that's the movie. I love it. It's a great introduction to Jimmy Neutron, the cool science experiments, gadgets, and ideas that he has. It genuinely is a fun time, and again, that soundtrack is so good. Aside from my other examples, you have We Got the Beat by the Go-Go's, Parents Just Don't Understand, no, not the Will Smith version, but the Little Romeo version, Blitzkrieg Bop from the Ramones, Bowling for Soup for the theme song. You also have artists like Britney Spears, the Backstreet Boys. Heck, Aaron Carter has not one, not two, but 3 songs on this soundtrack. It was just such a good curated group of songs that are just as memorable as the moments they are attached to in the movie. But while the movie was a success and it was smart to launch the show after the movie, it became a double-edged sword, as there was a planned sequel that they wanted to make come out in 2004, but because of disagreements on what the story should be, the real question of, are kids even now interested in seeing Jimmy Neutron in theaters when he's on their TVs anyway? To that I say, yeah, they probably would, but regardless, we still got a 3-season show and a spin-off show beyond the movie, which is its own bag of incredible. So let's take a look at a few episodes of the show together in this video. Here's a couple that I think fit in with the theme of hopefully you trying to fall asleep. Or maybe not, as this episode is Sleepless in Retroville. This is one that really stuck with me when watching the show, where it has the trio having a sleepover, and with Jimmy being Jimmy, he's invented the Slumbertron 9000 to help create the ultimate perfect sleepover experience, complete with pillows for pillow fights, pizza, and of course, scary stories. After having the machine set to tell the darkest of stories, they all get scared of Mr. Dark, which is the machine's AI, and the story it tells, and they shut it off. After falling asleep, Carl wakes up in a hunger and asks the machine for more pizza, but in Carl fashion, he ends up messing up the command, and through the machine's errors, it combines both a pizza with the eating children story, and now sentient pizzas with demonic faces and pillows chase and attack everyone in the house, until Jimmy comes up with the sunlight being their only weakness and it'll scare them. The plan works. Jimmy ends up letting the pizza get cooked and melt in the sunlight, but that's not why you or I remember this episode, is it? It sure was a fun, slightly spookier episode, but it's the effectiveness of the last second stinger, the last thing that will resonate with you. Then that same pizza awakes and exclaims, "Fools, haven't you heard of sequels?" But then everyone wakes up in a funny sequence of everyone having their own bad dream. Then the pizza wakes up and the pizza's wife says it was all just a dream, and that there are no such things as children. To be fair, the pizza/monster was only doing what Jimmy programmed the machine for, albeit through the error of combining the story and the pizza, but it did its job in scaring the children only to be melted to death at the hands of the kids. So who was really at fault here as the bad guy? Jimmy and the crew, or the pizza monster? I'll leave that up to you to decide. Y'all like lima beans? I sure don't. It's not for the taste, it's not for the look, it's simply for the fault of an episode of Jimmy Neutron. The episode, I Dream of Jimmy, from season 1, took us into the mind of Carl. Due to his increasing nightmares causing him a lack of sleep, Jimmy, the boy genius he is, uses one of his inventions to enter Carl's dreams and nightmares to help find the root of the problem. In parts of the dream, we see that Carl sees himself as the boy genius and Jimmy as the not boy genius, even going as far as to use him for a show and tell moment for the class that puts Jimmy in an electric chair and shocks him. Only problem is he feels the real pain of it. If you die in the dream, you die in real life. This also makes me think that there is some underlying jealousy turned into hatred within Carl's subconscious that is being portrayed here. Like Carl, I know you're into Jimmy's mom, that doesn't mean you need to torture and eliminate Jimmy over it. Jokes aside, we later find out that the root of Carl's nightmares is his fear of lima beans. Yes, lima beans. Underneath Carl's bed in the dream is a small anthropomorphic lima bean playing a harmonica. Nothing too worrisome, right? Well, as Jimmy turns his back on the lima bean to reassure Carl that it's just a little lima bean, behind him we see the same little lima bean eat the harmonica and grow in size, turning into a full lima bean monster that proceeds to chase them all. This is why I don't like lima beans. Seeing this when I was a kid terrified me to my core. The eyeless, sharp-toothed monster lima bean gave me nightmares. I vowed back then to never eat or in fact ever acknowledge their existence as real food until making this video. Let's just hope that I can sleep tonight. The rest of the episode is filled with weird and wacky moments within the dream to help Carl realize that he's dreaming so that they can actually escape. But once they do escape, the lima bean follows them out of the dream portal and continues the chase until being crushed by a large hammer. Then they gruesomely cut it up and eat it. The episode left such a large impact on me for the horrific lima bean, I'll never forget it. When I think back on Jimmy Neutron, this is one of the top episodes that comes to mind just because of that fact alone. And for another one, and for the heck of it, let's get a little weird, yeah? Let's talk about the episode Who's Your Mommy? The episode starts with Jimmy, Carl, Sheen, and Goddard visiting the desolate planet Shmengi in order to retrieve an Ultralord action figure Sheen had left behind while using the bathroom during a previous trip. As Sheen searches for his lost Ultralord, Jimmy, Carl, and Goddard stumble upon strange, almost flesh-like pods that hadn't been there the week before. Jimmy, intrigued by the sudden appearance of the strange structures, orders Carl to scrape him off a sample, reassuring Carl he will be monitoring from a safe distance the entire time. Carl, immediately reassured, begins to do so, not noticing when Jimmy throws himself to safety behind a rock. As Carl begins to scrape at a particularly fleshy part of the structure, the pod begins to twitch. Sheen returns with his rescued Ultralord figure just in time for him, Jimmy, and Goddard to look on in horror as the pod splits open, dropping a goopy, gray, spider-shaped alien on Carl's face. Jimmy and Sheen, understandably concerned and deeply grossed out, try to keep Carl calm as they rush him back to Jimmy's lab. There, Carl undergoes numerous tests, through which Jimmy learns that the creature is made of solidified energy and can be scientifically certified as gross. He also keeps Carl from looking at the terrifying state of his own face by claiming there are no mirrors in the lab. After a failed attempt by Sheen to hide the alien monstrosity under a fake beard, Jimmy manages to fry it off with a laser. To celebrate Carl's newly freed lower face, the boys decide to head to the candy bar where Carl begins craving a disgusting combination of vanilla ice cream, jalapenos, dill pickles, strawberries, salmon, and lard. This, combined with a series of mood swings Carl undergoes, and the fact that when he walks away, a glowing pink bulge is revealed to be growing out of his lower back, alerts Jimmy to the possibility that something may still be wrong with Carl. Back at the lab, after several more tests, Jimmy realizes Carl is pregnant, or at least has a living mass of energy growing in his butt. As Carl begins to stress about financially supporting a child, and Sheen begins to plan his baby baby alien rampage, Jimmy goes off to think. As a big fan of the movie Alien, I always appreciate a good homage to it, with the facehugger-like alien causing the reason why there is something living in Carl. In the school cafeteria the next day, Sheen feeds Carl weird food combinations to satisfy his pregnancy cravings until they are interrupted by Jimmy, who, excitedly, has developed a cure for Carl's condition. Carl, though, has grown unexpectedly fond of the concept of parenthood and wants to keep the energy mass, going as far as to prepare possible baby names. Schmengel if it's a boy, or Schmengetta if it's a girl. Sheen is just thrilled to be an uncle. After school, Jimmy goes to Carl's house, hoping to talk to him more about the situation. He quickly leaves in frustration, though, dragging Carl with him, when the entire Weezer family begin to talk about how excited they are for the pitter-patter of little somethings to be heard around the house. It is important to note that by this point in his pregnancy, Carl's back end is huge. Back at the lab, Jimmy expresses his concerns about how the baby might harm Carl during the course of the pregnancy. Carl, committed to the sacrifices of parenthood, brushes off Jimmy's concerns and heads off to the baby shower being hosted by the girls. In Cindy's bedroom, the girls and Carl are in the midst of opening alien baby-themed gifts and doing baby shower-related themes, just with this alien twist to it. And that's when Jimmy barges in, anxious to study the baby alien and Carl's condition further. Cindy then proceeds to destroy Jimmy in an argument, and Sheen comes into the room in a matching apron set carrying a tray of scones. Jimmy, frustrated by the group's collective nonchalantness about the whole situation, storms out, but just as the party is starting back up, following Jimmy's departure, the lights flicker out. Out on the street, Jimmy is heading back to his lab, with Sheen trailing after him. But just as Sheen catches up with Jimmy, they look up to see that a giant, glowing, purple jellyfish-looking alien is flying through the sky, sucking up electricity from the houses down below, recognizing that energy making up the giant alien as the same energy within the creature inside of Carl. So Jimmy realizes that it must be the mother searching for its child. He instructs Sheen to get the girls out of the house and to keep Carl safe inside. The alien continues to fly overhead, devouring electricity until eventually the entire city goes dark. Jimmy, who's watching in surmounting horror, looks around and, spotting the local power plant, immediately comes up with a plan. Sheen, back at Cindy's house, pushes the girls out, including Cindy, who is literally tossed out of her own home by Sheen to the decree of, "Don't be selfish, get out." In Cindy's bedroom, Sheen tries to keep Carl calm and ignorant of the approaching danger by having him practice breathing exercises, which apparently involves rocking him back and forth very violently like an exercise ball. Jimmy, on his end, sneaks into the power plant and flicks some switches, turning it on to surge electricity within the power plant to get the alien's attention, to which it does as the alien immediately begins to follow the electricity. Sheen, still trying to keep Carl distracted, has him practice calming visualization, an exercise that quickly becomes stressful as the lake Sheen is describing becomes, narratively, infested with a horrifying monster. Carl is listening in terror when suddenly, based on a very wet sound effect, has his water break. Carl calmly gets up and prepares to give birth, I guess, and that sound effect was just something else to witness. On the street outside, Jimmy is waiting for the alien to get closer to the power plant in order to start his plan, but just as it's about to be close enough, Carl runs in to tell Jimmy not to hurt her, knowing what she wants. Carl then turns around, and in a pulse of blue light and cackling electricity, a small, flying jellyfish energy alien baby comes out of his back end. Carl says goodbye to his surrogate baby, names him Schmengel, and gives him a hug, during which he is electrocuted with enough power there to kill a horse. As mother and child fly off into the sky, Jimmy remarks on how painful the hug must have been, but Carl wisely remarks that letting go of your kids is always painful. A month later, Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen are back on the planet Schmengi, this time wearing party hats and carrying a large birthday present. They enter a cave where EDM music is playing, and 3 baby aliens are sitting around a gooey-looking birthday cake wearing matching party hats. The boys declare a happy birthday to Schmengel, having taken on these uncle roles to the young alien, with Carl giving him a hug and once again getting electrocuted in the process. Sheen, who willingly goes into the hug, also gets electrocuted. Jimmy, being the smarter one in the whole situation, naturally doesn't want to be tasered and begins to run away from Schmengel's tentacles, as then Carl and Sheen sit down and begin eating just the grossest looking cake I have ever seen. And yeah, that's the episode. The references to Alien, the fast pace of the situation, Carl Carl's sporadic mood swings and outbursts, as well as the ridiculousness of Sheen in the episode, it all really just helps solidify this as an episode worth remembering, I guess. Of all the episodes to bring up when talking about Jimmy Neutron, try bringing this one up to see how others react to it, especially from just describing the basic plot. Carl got pregnant from an alien and gives birth from his lower back. Yeah. Well, let's switch gears from Jimmy Neutron for now and get into something a little chilling. Wait, remember Ahh Real Monsters? I was very tempted to yell the ah part, but I couldn't do it to you if you were sleeping. That would be rude. Anyway, as for the show, it's one of those classic Nickelodeon shows coming from Klasky Csupo, the studio behind the Rugrats and a future long list of other shows shortly after, like The Wild Thornberrys, Rocket Power, and As Told by Ginger. Aside from being known for having odd and different character designs across their library of shows, Ahh Real Monsters just may take the urinal cake for that yet. As the title states, the show is about monsters. Real monsters, ones that are supposed to make humans scream. This was a show that I grew up with and came to love at the time thanks to just how unsettling it can be. Not for it being scary, but just looking at the character of Crumb here and just being confused as to what I'm looking at. While Ahh Real Monsters may not be remembered for being the best cartoon to come from the powerhouse line of Nickelodeon classics, it does serve as a great look back to creative ideas that cartoons can really be anything, and you can find an attachment to good characters regardless if they're whatever Crumb is. Funny enough, Ahh Real Monsters serves as a classroom-based comedy, where our three main characters, Ickis, Oblina, and Crumb, attend a special underground school for monsters of all shapes and sizes, to learn how to properly scare humans when they have to head up to the surface to do so as their school assignments. All ran by Grumble, the headmaster, who also makes me question, what am I looking at? But nevertheless, that's the base premise of the show. It's simple and allows enough room to be played around in for a wide variety of adventures. For our main three, they are quite the interesting bunch. Ickis, voiced by Charlie Adler, has big shoes to fill. And I don't mean because of his large feet, I mean because he is the son of the school's best student. He struggles with being a leader that he is completely capable of being, but isn't the most brave when it comes to getting the job done, or being involved in certain situations, leading to him often slacking off from his responsibilities with school as he much rather just have fun with his friends. When it comes to getting the scares out of people, he can grow in size to appear menacing, when he can find the courage to do so, that is. Oblina, voiced by Christine Cavanaugh, is the rich kid in the group, having a very prim and proper way of speaking and presenting herself when speaking and doing her schoolwork. It's funny to see these traits given to what is, well, a monster, but while she is clearly the best student currently in the school, that doesn't mean she can't get wrapped up in a bunch of shenanigans stemming from her two best pals. As far as scaring goes, she has a knack for shapeshifting and pulling her insides out, so don't eat your lunch while watching the show because Oblina just might show you exactly where that food goes to digest. To round out the group, there is Crumb, voiced by David Eccles, and he's, well, the only way I can describe him as is a hairy human meatball that if they were to do a handstand, that nose would certainly look like something else. He also holds his own eyeballs within his own hands, and that seems to be such a living nightmare to have to deal with. Surely they must get infected all the time. He's just Crumb, okay? He's just fun to have around while you try and decipher everything that defines him. His armpits can radiate an awful smell that aids him in his scaring endeavors, and together, these three go on plenty of adventures that constantly leave them almost caught by the public, which would expose the existence of monsters. Running from October of 1994 until November of 1997, Ahh Real Monsters lasted for 4 seasons, totaling 52 episodes. Something I spoke about within a Rocket Power video is how that show was largely inspired by the kids of Gabor Csupo and Arlene Klasky. They would find the same reasoning here where at this point in their lives, their kids were into monsters. So when Nickelodeon asked them for what else they have after the Rugrats became a hit as one of the first 3 Nicktoons, Gabor Csupo along with Peter Gaffney, who also worked on the Rugrats, came together and created Ahh Real Monsters. And it was given the go-ahead to turn into a full series once they saw the sketches of what the monsters would look like. They were odd and different, but they weren't too horrifying. aside from Crumb. So much so that it could work fine for a kid's cartoon. They all have a unique look to them and were partially inspired from the visual look of the animated Beatles film Yellow Submarine. But rather than just be as colorful as that film, the tones needed to be more muted. It needed to feel like both worlds were a dump, whether it was the area the monsters reside underneath, an actual dump, or the world above, putting a reflection of ourselves as to who the real monsters could be. Okay, it's not that deep, but the way that the show was designed made for a creepy and dilapidated feeling. But to the monsters and people in the world, it's their everyday life, so they pay it no mind. The other main character they constantly have to deal with is Grumble, voiced by Greg Berger. He runs everything underneath the dump and oversees the school, making sure the monsters are accomplishing their monster tasks, as he heavily judges them based on how they perform, being able to see the scares they perform. But why do the monsters need to scare humans? What's their motivation? Simple. They basically survive off the fear of humans. In the show, there is this pool of elders, something that can actually speak to few monsters directly, but it serves as life itself for the monsters, a place that breeds the continuation of monsters existing, that is fueled by the fear and the belief in monsters, not necessarily confirming they are real, and I'll get to that in a second, but when humans emit fear, it's that belief in thinking that what they are seeing is real that then translates into your mind, what turns to fear. Here, it's just materialized into actual monsters. If the fear dries up, so does the pool itself, resulting in the monsters literally disappearing, vanishing from the world. So for a viable reason, it's a solid bit of lore that makes the nonsensical make sense. On the other hand of not being captured and monsters fully being exposed to everyone in a non-scary way, all the monsters in general have to constantly deal with Simon, voiced by Jim Belushi, who is dead set on proving that monsters are real. And it's not just these personal, small, scary experiences that make you sound crazy when you tell others about them. While the show clearly had the surface level angle of scaring its audience through its visuals, the real themes in the show are displayed between those moments in friendship, building up three friends who have to work together to accomplish whatever they are tasked with doing, or in trying to fix what they messed up. Each character has their own personal struggles that get brought out in the series, and for me, seeing a character like Ickis deal with his own anxieties and how his friends can be there for him to help him overcome them in certain situations is something I can relate to greatly, even more so today as an adult. But don't get me wrong, as dark, creepy, or even as wholesome as the show likes to present itself, it's also really funny. The running gag for monsters getting in trouble and being punished or threatened to be punished by the Snorch is hilarious because, I mean, he doesn't seem so bad, he's dripped out, he looks chill, but the threats of being tortured by him have the monsters in school try their best to never have to live out those nightmares of being forced to listen to opera music, among other things, with him having this companion named Zimbo that serves as his mouthpiece, who acts like a no-good hall monitor to get others in trouble by reporting them. But even then, for the Snorch, he has his own character arcs that show he really isn't as menacing or mean as the show makes him out to be. He gets his time to shine, coming out of his shell, showing a more compassionate side towards other monsters, and carrying a strict code that their job is to scare humans, not to harm them, even if provoked or tempted to do so. He's intelligent and a pretty cool side character that just proves that there is more that this show has to offer than what the base premise would have you think. The world of being under the dump or in the sewers gets built out to seem like it's tangible for the monsters to live in. They eat garbage, surf on running sewer water when toilets get flushed. They have their own monetary system built on tonsils instead of money. They have their own holidays, with one of them being a once-a-year shedding of their skin, which just makes things that much more unsettling. All of this to say that there felt like there was a lot of care that went into developing a real life for these monsters and how they live, what they learn through their studies, and how they have to navigate the surface world for their scares. I commend the show for going as far as they did to accomplish this, and it's really thanks to the team behind the scenes where the writers, animators, and voice actors all worked in a collaborative way to really sell the world they built and the characters within it. With as fun but equally as unsettling as the show can be, lasting for 4 seasons is pretty great. But what happened to the series in the end? Well, at the end of its 4-season run, there were no more plans outright for another season of the show, and obviously the creators went on to continue with the Rugrats and plenty of other shows shortly after. To fully end things off though, There were some talks about making a theatrically released movie where the show could get as wild, dark, and creepy as it wanted, but at some point in its production, the plug was pulled as it apparently would be too frightening for kids. Whether that's the actual reason or not, the show was officially over, the movie never happened if it was real, and Ahh Real Monsters lives on as this very memorable little slice of 90s Nickelodeon. I really enjoyed the show for all the reasons that may sound wrong. It's gross, unapologetically gross, and I love that in the world they created and the characters we do have only make for the gross out moments to feel at home, and not as weird or random as they would feel in other properties. The main three characters themselves have legit relatable traits that make them more than just the monster they are trained to be. They feel like a legit group of friends when they interact with one another, showing a level of care that makes for some genuinely wholesome moments that drive a portion of the show that you may not have expected to see within a show about monsters. The series was at least initially popular enough to warrant a video game back in 1995, and since then make appearances in other Nickelodeon-based video games, and for animation, the show wouldn't be the last time we would see them, as they would have a fun little crossover cameo within the episode of the Rugrats titled Ghost Story, making the first time in Nickelodeon history there was a crossover between the cartoon properties within an actual episode of a show, regardless if they both came from the same team making them. Revisiting this show again has brought back some incredible memories of watching it back when it was on TV, and surprisingly it holds up well, being an absolute treat to watch any time of the year, but definitely more so for a time like October. It certainly isn't my favorite show from Nickelodeon's 90s offerings, but it crafts a unique charm that you can't take your eyes off of. You may be turning on a show about monsters, but you'll soon find that there is more than just that blanketed in there. It can have scarier or creepier moments mainly thanks to its visuals, but there is a lot of laughs to be had, a lot of heartfelt, genuine moments between the characters to experience, and overall, you might just find a love of a group of unsettling monsters that you didn't think you could have. Also, Crumb is there, and he still makes me feel uncomfortable, and that's why he's the best character. Whew. Talking this long has me feeling like there's a furball in my throat. Maybe that's a sign of what to speak about next. CatDog, my favorite anatomically mysterious conjoined feline canine animated show from the 90s. As a kid, I never felt the need to question what am I looking at here. It just was. And you accepted that fact and moved on to your next Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel with your neighbor, who would probably have counterfeit Exodia pieces and swear they're real. Regardless, the show for some reason in my mind ends with the TV movie about them looking for their parents, but it wasn't. In fact, it was the season 4 premiere 3-episode special. Then by episode 8 of the 4th season, the show came to what I guess would have been an abrupt ending. Sopranos style. Cat and dog are out eating, paranoid, looking back at the door of the restaurant. Suddenly, the door opens. Cat and dog look over and cut to black. It's a masterpiece. No, but for real, today I'd like to talk about the final moments of CatDog, why it was so weird, how this show concluded so quickly. Part 2 of the final episode, Meat, Dog's friend, revolves around Dog's need to eat meat, while thinking Johnny Meatseed here plants meat trees around the world to grow meat. So Cat decides to educate Dog on the truth about where meat comes from, which causes Dog to freak out about what he's been eating all this time. During the night, Dog is visited by 3 meat ghosts to take him on a self-discovering journey through the error of his meat-eating ways. A Lederhosen hamburger shows how he was turned into said hamburger. Next, Dog is visited by a chicken taco explaining their story of being stuffed into food in a rather gruesome way. Dog's final ghost is a New York hot dog telling Dog just what's what, and his friend Nervous, a pig, explains that you wouldn't want to eat a friend, friends don't eat friends, and you wouldn't download a car, would you? Dog swears off meat for good while Cat explains Dog's need to eat meat. Dog won't even let Cat eat fish and goes crazy at the grocery store as every food item, from vegetables to fruit to meat, you name it, are all friends, and friends don't eat friends. Now everything he tries to find as a substitute causes hallucinations of everything being his friend. The visuals here, while going through Dog's mind, are pretty cool. Chalk Zone-esque even, leading to Dog realizing that Cat isn't on the food list, exclaiming, "You're not my friend, you are my brother," turning into a black and white horror movie where he tries to cook and eat Cat, which is pretty morbid, literally dunking Cat's head into a pan then slamming a microwave on him. Just at the last second, Johnny Meatseed plants plants meat trees outside their house, totally negating the lesson that Dog was learning and making it seem as if meat doesn't come from his friends. Okay, interesting. On one hand, it's good to learn about not eating your friends. And in the show's case, it's the same lesson if you happen to be an animal, and they clearly are, but somehow there are these trees that grow what the animals are made out of anyway. So then no one would be truly killing and eating said animals? Dog easily, while dreaming, made up these stories in his head about the various food items coming from animals, more specifically, some from animals he considers friends. But there's a real channel that Cat shows, which is called the Meat Channel, and everyone involved in that channel knows and shows that meat comes from animals. So logically, some animals in CatDog believe in the fact that meat comes from their fellow animals, and while there is this magical man running around planting meat trees that grow actual meat, which is real? What's the dream? Is everything after we see them head to bed a dream, a hallucination, or do the majority of animals living in the world CatDog has built okay with animals, some like the same animals they are, being killed and eaten? Does any of this make sense? Am I hallucinating? Are you dreaming this all right now? Is reality falling apart and this paradoxical situation we find ourselves in a way to make a pseudo statement that both meat is bad and fine, tofu bad and good, fruits and vegetables bad and good? Is eating your brother okay? My brain hurts. I think I'll just stick to those CatDog cheese nips. Now, why did CatDog end on this particular note? Why only 8 episodes into the 4th season did Nickelodeon no longer feel like CatDog fit their programming block, especially with the season being so important with a huge TV movie to start it off attempting to convince you that those were the answers to explain why CatDog is a CatDog? Nope, learned nothing, but I had a great time. Just like school, minus the good time part. CatDog unfortunately had its plug pulled shortly into its 4th season for the biggest and main reason of low viewership. Yeah, Nickelodeon noticed that the show had not been receiving the viewership threshold the network sets for them to give the go-ahead for shows to continue on, in which CatDog was not able to get past 25% of that ask. So Nickelodeon took the old yellas over here out back, and well, you know. But to have this be the last note CatDog leaves us on is odd. Not bad, just odd. It sure is in CatDog fashion to be shocking and weird, but to leave us all more confused than ever, and that being the final episode just feels, well, you know what? It feels kind of right, I guess. In a weird way, what other avenue would you have CatDog end on? Most would say the Great Parent Mystery, and that's totally understandable, but in the spirit of CatDog, ending in such a distractibly noticeable moment made it more memorable, if that makes sense. Part of it being one of the weaker episodes overall, perhaps writing-wise or substance-wise, the fact that we get an episode full of contradictions, full of colliding perspectives, or just a whole bunch of nonsense for the sake of it being funny, is kind of in a way explaining what CatDog is. The character, or I guess characters, that they are in general, two complete opposites that are constantly at odds with different personalities, different viewpoints. It somehow weirdly fits into what CatDog was. Again, it wasn't the peak of the show where it had been nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Writing in an Animated Television Production in 1998. Clearly, the show had been steadily losing the interest of its viewership over the years leading to this cancellation, and it spent its last moments being as disjointed as the odd couple relationship Cat and Dog had throughout the show. Yes, there were moments in the show's running showing how much they cared for each other. I'm not attacking that. I liked their brotherly relationship, but even you have to admit the show focused heavily on their differences and how their character traits clashed nearly every episode at one point, regardless of coming together in the end. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you spend time over analyzing a cartoon from your childhood to the point where you have to make a video on it, both saying it's bad and good, means that either the deeper meaning runs true to how people are and can be, and we all have our faults, we all have our strengths, to which make us unique, or it means that I have had way too much coffee to be writing this and now reading it later on at 3 a.m., and I should be much like you listening to the video, falling asleep. But on a more serious note, CatDog is a special show, not only for what it meant to me overall growing up, but how unique and different it felt from everything else at the time. It was weird, it was interesting, and it had charm. The majority of the show produced some incredible moments, some creative animation, songs, lessons, and an overall feeling of curiosity for the more zany moments. For some reason, this final episode intrigues me. It's not a great send-off for the fun times the series granted us beforehand. The TV movie really felt like the best send-off they could have given us. And since the show was coming to an end, not even halfway through what a usual 20-episode season would offer for that show, it's weird we even saw anything past the movie with viewership on the decline. But saying that, I still appreciated a few more runs in the park with one of my favorite cartoons from back then. It just feels like there were episodes held back or were in the can already that they just needed to release and get out there since they were paid for already. In the end, I will always love CatDog, and something about it fills me with an instant warming nostalgic feeling when I watch it. But let's talk about something a little unsettling, just for a fun way to end things off for tonight. It's no secret that Invader Zim is visually one of the most uneasy shows to watch. I truly mean that in the best way possible, as I think Invader Zim molded my love for horror films and video games that go above and beyond the Call of Duty to make me tense up in disgust and awe about what I'm looking at. It's easily what you remember the most when looking back or thinking about Invader Zim. Those moments of pure what the heck energy that make you question if this was a show for kids or not. In fact, the show had quite the pushback from the network, Nickelodeon, for many instances throughout the show's run, but at the same time was able to creatively and sometimes directly in your face get away with so much. So I wanted to take a look at the show itself, how it was able to get some of those moments okayed by the network, and what pushback the show faced. So keep your organs on your insides and your eyeballs in your head. Let's talk about the struggles of Invader Zim. So how did we get here? And by that I mean moments like this, or even this. Well, that all goes back to the creator of the show, Jonan Vasquez, whom I share a birthday with, and that's not important to you, but it is to me. Jonan created a comic book series called Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, and if that title doesn't immediately give it away, yes, he in fact was a homicidal maniac. Shocker. The visuals evoke such a distorted view of something chaotic, something that some may find grotesque, yet it was gripping and had this pull to keep you engaged. From here, a spin-off comic series was created called Squee. It continued the darker themes and feelings that you'd have reading Johnny, but what was extra special about these comics was that it caught the eye of Mary Harrington, a producer at Nickelodeon who was looking for the next slightly edgier cartoon for the network. She was hooked on the comics based on the visuals and characters themselves, and contacted Jonan, giving him a chance to pitch a new animated series for Nickelodeon, and with having no experience dealing with animation, he said yes, and Invader Zim would be that pitched show. The idea for exactly what Invader Zim would be took him 1 hour before he knew this was the direction he wanted to go. But this journey wasn't easy beyond this point. His origins and storytelling mixed with his visuals are distinctively horrifying in the best of ways, but maybe not so much to a kid's show, leading to a lot of pushback from Nickelodeon on a constant basis. Episodes would constantly have scenes either reworked or cut in general in order to make the episode viable for network play. The relationship between the network and those working on Invader Zim would be described as a little dysfunctional, and there was just a conflict in personalities, intentions, and modus operandi. The reality was just not a great fit, and yes, it was a problem. These statements come from writer of the show, Eric Trueheart. While a lot of moments in the show were completely scrapped or cut from the final product, there were some moments that they ended up keeping in the final product, but in a workaround way that made it okay for the censors and made it more horrific for the mind. Sometimes not showing and implying the horror is scarier for your mind to fill in those gaps of what you don't see. So the subtlety, or the lack thereof, is what ultimately gave this show its specific uniqueness, on top of all the weird stuff you get to see on the screen. But what would be some of those moments or workarounds that caused the team working on Invader Zim to clash constantly with the network? Let's take a look. So there was quite the amount of stuff cut for time, or cut for being not subtle for the network, and I can't really show you what those ideas were. It would be more of me just telling you. So instead, let's take a look at what was able to get through after some workarounds from the Invader Zim crew. These examples can be found as quickly as the first episode of the show, The Nightmare Begins, with a blink and you'll miss it moment where inside of Dib's fridge there is a milk carton on it with some slightly legible text that reads, "Rob Hummel is meat." Rob Hummel was one of the show's writers, but originally the milk carton was going to consist of a young girl with "Find Me" written on it, in reference to missing persons being advertised on milk cartons starting in the 1980s, called the Missing Children Milk Carton Program. Nickelodeon wasn't too fond of having this, regardless of how quickly in shot it would be, so it was changed to the reference of Rob. The episode episode Parent-Teacher Night featured a few moments with Gurr, in which what he was watching on TV needed to be changed. From the cartoons he was watching, originally being that of 40s cartoons featuring drinking, smoking, and weapons all on display, but of course this wasn't going to be able to slide. But even as something as small as the word diarrhea being shown on the screen needing to be changed to a red color instead of a brown color, because Nickelodeon didn't want the word to relate closer to the color of what the subject matter actually is. But I don't know if red was also a better idea than brown. Replacing the content on the screen in general was a bunch of random things that is just too quick and too much for one to comprehend what is being shown, and we get stuff like this, an aspirin commercial. In Walk of Doom, we get to see an example of how the relationship sometimes would be between those working on the show versus the network and their demands. This came in the form of a sign that said "Welcome to Mexico," as Zim would be in a taxi at the end of the episode. This would be changed to say carne, the Spanish word for meat, as Nickelodeon found that the "Welcome to Mexico" sign mixed with the visuals on screen would be offensive to some. In Bestest Friend, the character of Keith was planned to land on some power lines after falling off of a roof, leading to him being electrocuted. Now, characters getting electrocuted seems like a staple cartoon trope of bygone years, and in more modern times this was significantly toned down, especially by Nickelodeon, who would consider this as imitatable behavior. So in order to work around this, the crew had a few ideas of how to have Keith get hurt in pretty bad ways, like him getting hit by a car and mangled up from it, which, yeah, Nickelodeon didn't like that either. But what they got to do is ultimately more genius, and a moment where we really get to see the implied horror aspect of the show blossom. Keith does end up falling off the roof into some power lines, but all we get is a continued view from the rooftops as he falls off, along with an explosion with a torturous scream from Keith. So with that episode and the instance in Game Slave 2, where Iggins was shown or implied to be killed off, they were forced to find ways to make it show that it was not the case somehow by adding voice lines or extra scenes to prove all is okay. With Iggins literally bursting out of the elevator wreck accompanied with a title card and guitar riff. This was all added on after the elevator gets cut and we hit a title card saying "The End," before we fade back to an extra scene depicting his survival. Obviously, Nickelodeon wasn't a fan of any character being killed or implied that they were being killed, so during these moments where there wasn't an easy workaround and there needed to be some sort of compromise, the crew would do something like add an end card that would say no characters were harmed in the episodes, even if they clearly were. The back and forth between Nick and the Invader Zim crew was almost this constant battle of you can't do this or you have to change that, and with the creator's visions always being tweaked, the crew found fun ways to poke fun back at Nickelodeon, whether it was somehow still getting away with some pretty messed up things, just having to go about them extra creatively to get past the censors, or they would constantly and directly put it in the viewer's face through the character of Nick, reflecting the happier tone that Nickelodeon wanted infused in all of their cartoons and to be more appealing to a wider audience. The network wanted more Rugrats type of shows rather than something like an Invader Zim sharing the same network. There were some smaller things like in Door to Door, where some kids were going to be eating cockroaches. This was changed into them eating meat instead, but some roaches can still be seen in the frame to convey the uncomfortable, grotesque nature of the situation. In Battle of the Planets, the car pileup was changed from being on fire to just not being on fire. In Future Dib, the perpetual energy generator was supposed to explode into a mushroom cloud, but instead it just continues on to open a space-time rift. Sometimes the crew and Nickelodeon agreed on few things, like in the episode Hobo 13, where the character of Scooge would have to eat his own skin to survive, but both groups here found this to be a bit too far and just downright disturbing. Due to real-life events, a few things in the show would be changed or decided against, like the design of the character Dib, who wears a black trench coat, which Jonan fought for, and not changing the character at all, especially with the amount of times Nickelodeon pushed for Dib to not be a main character. With other tragedies, a whole ending was redone after airing one time on air showing New York getting turned to rubble, as well as an explosion at one point changing from the red, orange, and yellows to a green explosion. Another big thing that Jonan really wanted to add into the show was blood splatterings within different and more violent scenes, specifically in the Bestest Friends episode, but technically a more unsettling image would be left into various episodes of Invader Zim, leaving a fun, almost creepypasta-esque hidden image to find. Bloody Gurr. Yes, this image of Bloody Gurr is real and made its way to television unnoticed by the network on a number of occasions. Originally, this concept was never intended to be included in an episode of the show, as they all knew that it would be rejected. but since it was never handed to Nickelodeon for approval, there was not really a no given. So Chris Graham, an illustrator on the show, and director Steve Russell were able to sneak just a small singular frame of this image into the episode Bad Bad Rubber Piggy. Now, the only way to have caught it is if you think you saw something and claim it to be there. Later on in interviews, this would be proven as a true hidden image within that episode, sparking so many to try and pause it on that exact frame to get an image of Bloody Gur, which when you see it, it is extremely faint and barely able to be made out. No wonder this would be snuck past Nickelodeon executives, as it wasn't an easily caught thing by the masses either. But this whole thing became a lot more fun once it was revealed that this image of Bloody Gur was put into random points hidden within the last 14 episodes of the show. The Bloody Gur was a single frame drawing that Chris Graham drew when I was putting into the show at random points hidden within things. It is very hard to make out, and I am not telling where or when those frames are. You have to be a master to see Bloody Gur, even with a frame-by-frame VCR. If anyone finds it, let me know. He is in several places through the last 14 episodes. That was said by Steve Russell himself. Nickelodeon was completely unaware to this, and it became a scavenger hunt after it was confirmed to be real for fans to go and find these frame-perfect moments to see Bloody Gur. In fact, what I do find pretty interesting is that after the show was over and Nickelodeon found out about that slipping past them and put into broadcast, they didn't really care, as it was so quick and so faint that there would be no way kids even noticed it in the first place. So this standalone PNG of Bloody Gur is legit a real image that made it into the episodes after all, as a nice last laugh from the crew and something for fans to hunt for and speculate on for searching frame by frame those last 14 episodes. A nice little extra piece of legacy the show was able to leave behind. In the end, Invader Zim went on to become a cult classic for many who were brought up with it being on air, as well as the rise in popularity it had in the later 2000s, early 2010s, with fashion thanks to places like Hot Topic, which helped parade the popularity of Invader Zim even further, even if it had ended its official premiere of the remaining 6 episodes on TV back in 2006. Although with ratings of the show being what is believed to be the ultimate downfall of it, it was surprisingly and genuinely fun to have a sequel movie release in 2019, as Nickelodeon was having some legacy sequels to movies being released on streaming services like Netflix. Enter the Florpus was a nice throwback and really just gave fans of Invader Zim one last satisfying ride in this messed up world Shonen had created for us. I think for kids media there is room for horror shows or scarier shows, something that challenges your visceral response. Without shows like Invader Zim, I may have not found my love for grotesque bloody horror movies, or from Are You Afraid of the Dark to my love for tension-building horror with a side of helplessness. Growing up, the media you're surrounded by shapes and molds a lot of your tastes for what you end up having a like or dislike for. While yes, there are moments in Invader Zim that make me question if I should have seen that at a younger age or not, the show was something special that was able to capture an entire generation with wonder and disgust, and I mean that in a good way. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed listening and or have fallen asleep to this video. Until next time, have some nostalgic dreams. Good night.